Good afternoon. We got great attendance at both campuses for probably one of the most important days we've had at Windsor Regional in a long time. I say that because we're having the kickoff meeting for how we can in fact get patients through our system in a much better fashion. We know we've got issues. Angela is going to talk about some of the situations that she's dealt with over the years with patients who have not had great experiences with us getting to the right bed. And then we very, very fortunately have Sue, who's come with us to explain her experience with her family member. Once again, just acquainting us with the fact of why it's so important that we're doing the work we're about to do. We know as an organization, it's so important that every patient that comes to us gets the experience that they need and that they deserve, and that when they leave, they can say Windsor Regional is the best place on the planet. And that's our job, and that's our goal, and we know we have work to do. And it doesn't matter how much work we have to do. What matters is we know it, and we got a plan in place to fix it. And that's the excitement at Windsor Regional today. We know we've got work to do in terms of improving patient flow, and guess what? We have a plan to fix it. So without further ado, I'd like us to hear a little bit about the opportunities that we have. That's AKA the amount of work we have to do based upon patient experiences. I'm gonna listen to those experiences, and then we'll do a wrap up to talk about what our next steps are to make the experiences that patients have had in the past much better in the future. Angela.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, this is a very, very exciting program. And the reason it's so exciting is because our focus is patients, the patient experience. The impact we have on a patient from the moment they come into our house until the moment they leave us. I do receive a lot of calls, and I meet with a lot of patients and families about their experiences at each stage of their journey. These conversations range from long waits in the emerge, without any check-ins or information as to what to expect, fear and uncertainty as to what's going to happen to them if they're actually admitted as a patient, frustration if they have to be moved from room to room, lack of understanding about the whole discharge planning process, and ultimately fear of returning home, anxiety about the unknown, and without a plan that they can understand. On average, each day, 41 patients are admitted to the hospital through the ED. So 20 patients per day at MET and approximately 21 at OLET. The key word here is admitted. There are many, many more patients that go to the emerge that do not need an inpatient bed. So the point is that we help a lot of people on a daily basis. Patients require a lot of different types of services, but the main services that they require are medicine and surgery. On average, medical and surgical patients stay longer than expected, unfortunately. This makes our process a little less efficient. One of the biggest complaints that I receive from patients here is that they feel they're being discharged too early. So after doing some digging, what I normally find out is that clinically they're ready to go, but the patient and or family doesn't feel like they're ready to go home. Either they're scared of the unknown, they don't know what to expect, they're scared. And not all patients go home with family support, okay? Many patients end up going to either a long-term care facility, maybe it's rehab, or maybe it's home with family or alone with CCAC support. These services take time to set up, which means a patient may stay in hospital longer in order to get these things in place. So even though a patient may not need to be here for their acute needs, they may end up staying longer, which ultimately isn't that great for the patient, for us, and for the overall patient experiences. Each year, 5% of medicine patients are urgently readmitted to hospital within 7 days of their discharge from acute care. So if we speed things up too much, there is a risk that we discharge patients too early when they're not ready to leave. This program ensures a balancing act. Okay, so we're going to monitor to ensure that the changes don't have a negative impact. So understanding a patient's experiences when he he or she receives healthcare is integral to improving patient-centered care. I'd like to share some quotes with you from patients and their families which really illustrate some of their experiences. "I felt hopeless and helpless. I hope I never have to face this again. I've been moved 5 times in 2 weeks. I don't understand how this can happen. They are discharging my husband and I'm afraid to take him home. The way we treat patients from our first interaction to the last makes a lasting impression." And this last one comes from an RN who's not from Canada. She brought her son here who's 16, and she said how a simple conversation or touch can provide assurances and can make a difference when a patient is scared and unsure of their environment. These are all very, very powerful words. So, without further ado, and what I think is the most important piece is actually hearing from a patient and family about their experience. In early September of 2016, I received a call from Sue Gosnell. She's a retired nurse, and she called me to share her experience of when she brought her 86-year-old mom, Vera, to our hospital. I asked Sue to put her experience in writing, because on the phone I felt it was very compelling. She did. She wrote a letter that, in my heart, I believe paints a picture of a patient's experience through the eyes of a patient and their family. With the permission of Sue and her mother, we're going to have Sue speak and share her experience.
Thank you for moving your meeting. I'm so pleased to be here. I couldn't believe how open and receptive everyone has been. It's been an incredible experience. And let me first say, from my whole family's perspective, and I made this very clear to Angela from the beginning, every nurse, every physician we interacted with were incredible, knowledgeable, and we understood that they were doing the very best they could under the circumstances. So, dear Angela, as we had spoken on the phone and she asked me to recount, I say, my mother was taken via ambulance to Met Hospital on Wednesday, August 10th with complaints of chest pain and esophageal burning. The DEWS Emerge department was full. Mom arrived at Met at 2:45 and was seen in Emerge and sent to triage. The Emerge department at Met was full, and my 86-year-old mother and we, my sister and I, sat in the waiting room until 10 p.m. when Mom was transferred into an Emerge room and finally seen by a doctor at 11. While in Emerge, witnessing a cross-section of society within that room, my mom's vital signs were taken once at about the 6th hour, and a second time per our request, as her symptoms were not worsening nor were they abating. She remained very uncomfortable. However, the triage nurse had asked for the room's attention while she read from a laminated card the apologies on behalf of the hospital for delays, as both hospitals were at full capacity in Emerge, and if anyone felt their condition was worsening, to notify her. As I looked around the packed room, I wondered about the infirm and the elderly, who were voiceless, and wondered how they'd ever speak up if their condition were worsening without a loved one to speak on their behalf. As my mother sat in the waiting room for hours, a small boy sat across from her, vomiting, and he did so for a few others, while others sat in the coughs only section, coughing a few feet away. At no time, other than to take the vital signs once, did anyone, either nursing or auxiliary staff, ever approach my mother just for a simple, "How are you? Is everything okay?" or even an offer of nourishment. It seemed surreal. Once seen in the inner sanctum of Emerge, the place we so wanted to get our mother to, the care by both the nurses and physicians was excellent. I have said this experience that going through those inner doors was like passing from hell, i.e., an evening spent in the waiting room, into heaven, i.e., merge. My mother had an EKG, blood work, abdominal ultrasound to rule out aortic aneurysm, this after 8 hours in the waiting room, and was told to return for a cardiac stress test the next morning. We left with our 86-year-old mother at 2 a.m. We returned the next morning for my mother to have her stress test done, which she did and failed. The cardiologist who saw my mother recommended she be sent back to emerge on cardiac protocol and await an admission bed. Further tests and blood work were done while she was monitored and receiving morphine with effect for her chest pain. By Friday, August 12th, late afternoon, my mother was transferred to room 6109. Nursing staff again were fabulous, as were physicians. More tests were done. CAT scan of the lung to rule out blood clots. Mom was monitored and booked for a nuclear heart scan on Monday, August 15th to Tuesday, August 16th. Following the nuclear scan, Mom was then transferred to 6107 as they needed her bed to make an all-male ward. And we were then told an abnormality was found on the nuclear scan, and Mom would need to be transferred to Hotel Dieu for an angiogram. We waited until 3:30 on Wednesday, August 17th, for the EMTs to transfer my mom, who had been receiving morphine for her angina, to be transferred. There was talk among the staff with us whether a nurse would be accompanying my mom to the Dieu per ambulance, but we were told they couldn't spare staff to go. I therefore asked staff if, due to my mother's lack of stability, her angina, if they would give her a dose of morphine prior to transfer, which was readily done. We met our mom at the cath lab at Hotel Dieu, where we were told she may have an angioplasty as well, with the inherent risks involved. My mother had an MI during the procedure and severe pain while having 4 stents put in her heart, which was all managed by the fabulous team that cared for her. They had attempted the procedure in her right radial artery, but it blew, so she had to have a pressure cuff applied for a number of hours, so they went through her femoral artery. Mom was admitted to CCU that evening. Thursday was recovery day for Mom. She was seen by the cardiologist, and the procedure the previous day was explained, as well as what the previous tests had shown. Mom rested and received excellent care. Friday, Mom was told she'd be ready for discharge. However, at midnight, my mother was woken from CCU and told she was being transferred to room 411 on the step-down unit. Of course, she then didn't get back to sleep and had a restless roommate. When I arrived on Saturday at 0800 hours, while taking my mother to the bathroom, she developed symptoms, chest pain, had an EKG done, and we awaited the doctor. The nurses told me, and this was a common theme, if I may, so the nurses told me the doctor would be in between 8 to 11 in the afternoon. When the doctor still hadn't arrived, they said it was because he was working 2 hospitals, an explanation we had heard many times while we waited for doctors throughout my mother's stay. When the doctor did arrive at 6 p.m. that evening, he did not know my mother was still there, as he said he had her on his discharge list and didn't plan on seeing her, and only found out she was there when he arrived. He said she would be fine to go home the next day. On Sunday, my mother was discharged from step down with a number of changes to medications and discharge appointments. It was very apparent from the moment my mother arrived and emerged until her discharge that our healthcare system was broken. At no time, once attended to, did my mother receive anything other than quality care from nursing staff and physicians, and that is not our complaint, and our issues do not relate to them. I know there are provincial standards regarding wait times in Emerge. Those standards were not met in this case, And through anecdotal stories, many times or not, the response of too many patients that night from the hospital, too many patients, unusual circumstances, more than the system can bear, are only part of the story, I am sure, from the hospital's perspectives. However, an 86-year-old sitting in a jam-packed waiting room for over 8 hours with a child across from her throwing up and children running around and auxiliary staff practically screaming at people to not sit in the triage seats, and so much more, from our perspective, was simply not right. In fact, it was disheartening. Feeling well, both my sister and I, prior to coming to Emerge, left the next morning after 10.5 hours feeling tired, upset, and saddened by the whole experience. Thank goodness our mother, prior to this experience, would be considered a very well, strong person. She lives independently in a condo and leads an active, full life. She has continued to strengthen each day since she got home, for which we are thankful. So if outcome is good for my mother, why any complaints? And please note the above. It was our experience at both Met and Hotel Dieu that the turnover of doctors, for example, my mother was seen by 5 cardiologists, did not lend itself to continuity of care. For example, we were told at times that they were unaware a test had been scheduled and would have to review results, and we would never hear, and then mom would be seen by someone different yet again. 11 days all told, emerge and discharge day are included, to have tests done and results. In many ways, we were lucky, as when the cardiologist who initially saw mom for her stress tests insisted she be admitted, as he said the chance of doing further testing that he would want may take weeks. I'm sure had that happened, my mother likely would have been dead. Again, good outcome. We waited for hours for doctors who were, as we were told, working 2 hospitals. We understand that they're busy. We understand what we don't understand is why we don't have more of them. Yet we were also surprised that a cardiologist who saw my mom at Hotel Dieu had no idea she'd been at Met. How is that possible? This is one organization, and true, even if it weren't, is that a reflection of seamless delivery of care that our government and hospital executives speak of? So is our complaint with actual delivery of care in terms of expertise of doctors and nurses at both sites? Absolutely not. And then I go just to highlight what we saw as the issue. So I thank you for hearing us, and I hope that gives you all a better understanding of what our picture looked like from our perspective. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your experience. And while as an organization we are very saddened to listen to your mom's experience, I think we also know that we do have opportunities for improvement. And the Patient Flow project that we're starting to work on today at 12 o'clock is really to improve and to make amazing the experience for all patients. Once it's been decided that patient is going to be admitted, as soon as that's decided and until that patient is discharged, that's what we're working on. We're working along every step along the way to make certain that we do not have stories and experiences like Sue and her family have had. We know it's a lot of work. We know it's not an overnight success story, but we also know it's really important because there are a lot of Sues and there are a lot of Sue's families and there's all of us. And our opportunity here is to make sure that we do anything and everything that we can to make that patient journey as positive as we can. We can't fix everything at once, but there's a place to start. From when the patient gets admitted until that patient is discharged is what this work is all about. So
thank you everyone for coming today, and thank you so much, Sue, for sharing your experience. And so basically, you know, I'm so proud of all of us for really recognizing that this, and for our hospital to recognize that this is something we really need to work on. That, you know, it sounds like Sue's family was pleased with the medical care that they received. We really do have a lot of wonderful staff, wonderful doctors, nurses, frontline staff that really can you know, do their work as best they can, but we need to improve the processes. And so that's what this program is really about, and it is really focusing on the patient and the patients and their families' experience, and that's what we need to work with, and we need to keep hearing the voices from the patients. And so this is the goal. And so we've taken a number of different processes that through the patient's experience while they're going to be here as an inpatient, and looked at each step, and we're going to try and specifically check each step and work on the processes with the overall plan to help the families and the patients move through this hospital as seamlessly as we can. And certainly it sounds like communication is a big issue that we need to be working on, and so that's going to be something that we're going to be looking at as well when we look at each of these processes. So obviously the goal is to, if we can have patients move through the system with a better experience, that will improve their care, improve their satisfaction, but also if we can, you know, get them home or where they're going faster, if that's, you know, not necessarily faster, but more seamlessly, then we can help to cut down on the time that they wait in an ER, the time that they wait to get to the next step. We can stop moving them from bed to bed to bed, which is always a difficult experience in the hospital for sure. So that is our goal, and certainly, you know, I'm happy we're engaging with the frontline staff, with the patients, with the SOP team and the experts in these types of things as well, to help us get through this. And you know, hopefully by the end of this we'll have a much better patient experience, and you know, next year we'll come back and we'll hear hopefully lots of success stories as well. And you know, obviously it's going to be important to keep vigilant and keep working on these processes as they go, but you know, we're going to carry on with our excellent care, but hopefully deliver that in a better way so that people have a better experience.